Okay, so we're going to be having a look at the Stage 2 Music Individual Study elective and the final part of it, which is the report. Now the report, which is Assessment Type 3, is worth 30% of your grade and is a part of the elective that makes up the external assessment, which means it gets sent away to be externally moderated. It is made up of two separate components, each worth 15% each. Part 1 is the documentation of skills and Part 2 is the evaluation. Now the documentation of skills is essentially where you get to document what you've learnt by going through the process. That can take many forms. For example, it could be annotated drawings or photographs. It's going to certainly include regular reviews of the overall progress. The adaptation of the original goals. Now remember, when we actually did the topic proposal as part of the folio, we had to put out some projected goals and a projected schedule. Now's your chance to actually look at whether that was viable, whether it was feasible, and whether you actually had to adapt that or not. A lot of it is going to be reflective, so you're going to be reflecting on the materials gathered and tested, reflecting on the responses or feedback, reports from contacts and or support people, audience feedback, development of musical and or musical instruction skills through the recordings, DVDs or notation. It makes up 500 words. Okay, now in a little bit, I'm actually going to be showing you an example of a report that received an A grade. I got up into the A band, and we'll look at some of those things that that they did to actually get up into that band. But essentially, if you keep in the back of your mind that the documentation of skills is where you're actually talking about what you learnt. But the significant difference is that unlike the folio, which was informal in its language, the documentation of skills is formal. It's not going to sound like a journal entry. It's not going to sound like something you would write in the diary. Remember, the folio is very much just a collection of everything. Your documentation skills is very formal. So the language and everything you do needs to be reflective of that. Remember, maximum of 500 words. So you don't have a lot to kind of write about. So you want to try and avoid waffling and really kind of just cut down to the essential elements of what you learnt. Now the evaluation, which is part 2, is where you get to talk about how well the process went. This is where you get to do some more reflection. And there's 3 key areas. It's where you're going to demonstrate clear communication and independent conclusions. So remember, these are your thoughts, they're not other people's. Critiques of the process and its implementation. Once again, these are your critiques, and reflect on the outcome. So, did it work well? Would have there been things that you might have done differently before had you known what you know now? Once again, a bit of reflection, and it only needs to be 500 words. Once again, it's you don't really have a lot to. You don't have a very big word limit. Now, this particular part will have to be completed after you've completed the product and the folio. This is important to keep in mind, and like working within the time frame. The other 2 we said that needed to be handed up by the end of term 3. This gives you the holidays to start to look at the report writing process, and this is one of the reasons why I said it's very important to actually have everything else done. You can't do this part until you've actually completed the other 2, and you need time to be able to do it. Now, the most important thing to remember is that if you've done your folio well and you have made sure you've done regular journal entries and you've kept up kind of regular maintenance of your folio, this part's going to be very easy. So it's important to make sure that you're keeping on top of your folio, because you're going to be using a lot of that to write up the report. Same thing again, the performance standards uses the same rubric as the other 2 parts. What we're going to have a look at now is a student response that actually achieved an A grade. So if we just have a look at what they've done now, you'll notice that in the very first part, the suggestion was that it could be annotated photographs. There could be a number of kind of supporting things alongside of the written part, but it doesn't have to be. This particular person managed to get up into the A band without actually providing any of that, but certainly having those things in there is just going to add a little bit more depth. Now, this person here put on a concert. So their topic was music industry. Now, if you have a look at what they've done, and once I'm not going to go through everything in fine detail. You can have a look at it. It's on the website. But once again, the yellow boxes on the side actually indicate what they've actually done. And like I said, if you look at their if we go down to their performance standard, everything they've done was up in the A band. Nothing was down in the B band. So the way they've done that, they've got it. It's quite simple. They've started by putting their evaluation, and the evaluation goes through a lot of reflection. It's basically a summary of their opinion on how they went. But the most important thing to kind of point out here is that they the language that they're using is very formal. Some of the things they've cut out because legally they're not allowed to put in names and like if it's an advertising body or something like that. But you can kind of work out what they're talking about. And then after that, they've done the documentation of skills. So you don't necessarily have to actually do it in the order that they've suggested. You can actually do the evaluation first, the documentation of skills. But it would definitely be worth reading through and maybe just kind of coming up with some themes and some ideas that they've used. The other thing to kind of keep in mind is that obviously this was written for somebody who did music industry as their chosen topic. It's obviously going to be a lot different. Certainly if you're building an instrument or if you're doing tutoring or things like that, actually having some annotated photographs and things like that would probably be really crucial. So your evaluation and your documentation skills is really going to, like the format that it takes is going to be a bit dependent on what elective or what topic you've chosen. So that just gives you some ideas about what needs to be in your report. As I said, I'd strongly advise that you go and actually have a detailed read of this. And just have a look at some of the language things that they've used, maybe some of the key elements and themes that they've used to kind of write about. And use that as a reference point to check to see whether you're on track. Okay, well that concludes the final tutorial, and I hope it's been helpful.